Welcome everybody to the seminar on judging and photography. Just before I introduce our speakers, I would like to let you know that this session is being recorded and will be available on the site for up to 6 months. Please remember there's no sharing of any of the seminars with anybody outside the registrants of the convention. And please, if you have any questions, type them in chat and we'll deal with them at the end if time permits. So I would like to introduce Katherine Lindsey. Kathy is a past District 2 Director. She was a competitions chair and flower show liaison while on the board and was a co-founder and a continuing member of the OHA Judging Committee. Her horticultural and design knowledge includes OHA certification in design and horticulture judging and Garden Clubs of Ontario accredited design judge. She's a co-author of OJS 2019, plus the OHA photography judging and virtual show guidelines. Penny Stewart. Penny is the past District 3 Director. She is involved on the OHA Judging Committee and the Convention Flower Show Committee. Her credentials include OHA certification in design and horticulture, the Royal Botanical Garden accreditation in horticulture, and Garden Clubs of Ontario accreditation in design. She is also a student of the O'Hara School of Ikebana. Jim Mabey is OHA member for over 40 years, District 10 Director from 2002 to 2007, past president of the OHA in 2007-2008, judging schools and updates coordinator since 2011, certified OHA judge, accredited GCO design judge, a lily judge with the North American Lily Society, and an all-around good guy. Yeah. If you have any questions throughout the talk, please type them in the chat room and we'll try to get to them at the end of the presentation. The session is being recorded and will be available online for 6 months. It is my pleasure to introduce Kathy, Penny, and Jim, who will be speaking on the OHA guidelines for virtual shows and photography judging. Go ahead, Kathy.
Okay, thank you very much, Charlene, and welcome everyone. It's a pleasure to have an opportunity to participate in such an unusual and different forum. But nice nonetheless in that, given that I live in the Ottawa Valley, it's definitely nice not to have to travel, I have to say, particularly in these times of COVID. So I'm going to start the presentation. I will share my screen. Let's go here. Oh, we've got Jim. Let's go back to the front. Here we are. So this is a session for judges and anyone else who's interested in judging or understanding how judging works, whether it's a show organizer, schedule writer, exhibitor. And it'll be in 3 parts. I will speak to the virtual show guidelines, which were just recently released. Jim will speak to the photography guidelines, judging guidelines, and Penny will share some questions and answers that we've had as the members of the OHA Judging Committee. I also want to acknowledge here that there are other members who've been participating on the committee and have had feedback into to the work that we've been doing. So thanks to everyone. So the virtual show guidelines were issued in May. It's about a 14-page document. It will look very familiar to those of you who know, and no doubt all of you know, the Ontario Judging and Exhibiting Standards. So we used that format, but then adapted it and modified it to be able to address other topics that come up that are very particular to hosting virtual shows, as well as judging virtual shows. So I do encourage you to have a look. If you are hosting shows or are interested in hosting shows, it hopefully will be a useful guideline for you to think through what would be involved in taking on that kind of activity. Of course, you know, the advantage, certainly up until now at least, is that it allows us to continue to participate in shows and interact and involve our members, even though we're not able to get together face to face, which has been our typical strategy or approach. Okay. So the guideline is available on the OHA website under the shows tab, under the useful guides for show organizers, judges, and competitors. And it draws on a number of different sources of information, including OJS. And I'll refer to those later in the talk, just towards the end, if you're interested. And it also provides a recorded reference to those sources. And of course, the reason why we did it was that societies and districts are interested and are having virtual shows as a result, in response to COVID-19. So we felt it was valuable as a committee to pull that learning and information together to provide some guidelines from the committee. And if you decide that you would like the flower show to be judged, not all do, we do encourage that you look at the judges that are certified listed on the OHA judges list, which is also available on the website under the shows tab. So while the guidelines are specific to flower shows, we do think that they have value in terms of how to think through running a digital virtual photography competition, arts or youth competition. So there may be some value there beyond just flower shows. However, as OHA certified judges, we're not qualified to judge those other categories. Although certainly the OHA convention competitions typically provide some guidance on how to judge those other kinds of competitions. Although this year, having checked the website, given that it's a showcase and is not being judged, that information is actually not in the 2021 schedules. And as a reference, because we are asked to sometimes judge photography, we did put a set of guidelines, a guideline together, which was released in 2021. And Jim will speak to that in more detail a bit later in the talk. So these are all the reasons why we want to have flower shows. And given that we have constraints given COVID-19, virtual shows have emerged as a way of continuing to have shows, either for members or others, quite frankly, globally, it could be. And it allows us to have a broader range of participants if we so choose. And it does eliminate the need to travel, which is also a benefit. So the information sources were the OHA website, shows tab, OJS, and a number of virtual show schedules that have been made available for shows put on by different garden clubs and flower show societies, and for example, the South African Flower Union show, which was global. And so we want to really thank those organizations for their efforts to pull this information together and try and work through the process of how we do that. So these were all reviewed in putting the guidelines together. Clearly, it's a work in progress. And so we certainly would appreciate learning about your experience with virtual shows. And it may well be that as we move out of the restrictions of the pandemic, we may still want to consider having virtual shows for the reasons that I mentioned, in that it's a broader range of participants and no need to travel, or even thinking of including a virtual class or two in our shows that do that same thing. So as you have experience, we certainly would appreciate learning about it, seeing photos of it, and you can send your input to us at ohajudges@gmail.com. The guidelines initiative was led by myself and Ann Harvard under the auspices of the judging committee. And I just wanted to acknowledge the contributors and reviewers who back in that process. So I don't want to go into any more detail. You can go look at those on your own time, and some of you may already have. So I will now pass it on to Jim to talk about the photography judging guideline.
Okay, thanks, Kathy. As you'll notice from this slide, there are 6 pages in the photography guidelines. So there's quite a bit of information there that everybody needs to look at. Go on the web in the Garden Ontario website and check them out, because you do need this stuff. The OHA Judging Committee released a set of guidelines because the OHA certified judges were sometimes being asked to also judge photography classes. Many times they were doing this kind of blindly, and we were just picking out a pretty picture here and there. Most of us had no idea of what criteria to follow and how we should be judging the photos. Guidelines are now available on the OHA website. Check on the shows tab at the top. Scroll down just a little bit, then click on useful guides for show organizers, judges, and competitors. And you can now click on OHA Photography Judging Guidelines, and up pops everything you need to guide you through judging a show. As you will see, this is based on a 100-point scale, the same as everything else in OJS 219. When it came to selecting a method of creating a scale of points for photography, there were a lot of back and forth statements about which method was the most beneficial to the OHA judges. The team looked at several other different scales of points and came up with what we thought was a reasonable set for our use. Under composition, you'll notice that there are 35 points total, and there was a discussion about the use of the rule of thirds. We finally decided on using the query, was the rule of thirds used, or was there a good reason not to use it? Although having the main subject normally placed off center, as seen in the rule of thirds, there are cases to be made for the subject being centered. For example, when symmetry is a primary aspect of the photo. Note, this action will be a judgment call made by you as the judge. An artistic merit came next and had a total of 25 points, and it's broken down into these segments. Impact, we did have 15 there, and that was an oops on our part. We just kind of missed it on the website, and it got through, and it will be fixed. So it's going to now go down to 10 points. Creativity was worth 10, and other aspects was worth 5. I already know what everybody's going to ask. And you're scratching your head saying, just what are these other aspects? Well, if you go into the website where we told you to go, you'll find that there are 7 points of interest on this topic for you to use. Technical merit has also a total of 25 points, and it's broken down into segments. Color is worth 5 points, lighting worth 5 points, other aspects worth 15 points. On that website, there are almost 2 full pages on this topic of other aspects for technical merit, and you need to familiarize yourself with these. I'm recommending you take a printed copy with you when you're judges, or you bring them up on your electronic device when you're there judging. The last part of the scale of points was for presentation, and it had a total of 15 points. These points are for compliance with the show schedule and the quality of the production. Deductions should always be proportional to the degree of non-compliance in everything, not just in photography. Could I get you to do a slide, please, Kathy? The guide explores each category in more detail through a series of questions that we think is helpful when you decide who's going to be the winner. The OHA districts and societies should consider revising their photography judging scale to use the new OHA guideline. Thanks, Kathy, if you will. We need to thank everyone who had input into preparing these guidelines and hope that you will be using them in your upcoming photo judging endeavors. Notice all the people on this page who have worked hard to get this in. And I know Kathy and I really put a lot of time into this. So thank you, Kathy. Next slide. And I'm going to call on Penny to go into recent questions and answers. Penny, your microphone's off.
There we go. We have a few questions and answers that we put together, but more importantly, we would like to hear your questions, and we'll come up with some answers. I see a question from Kathy Dyer. I'm still seeing the scale of points slide. Okay, Kathy seems to be having a little technical difficulty with the slideshow. You should be seeing, Kathy, a page that says recent questions and answers. Okay, next slide. Why don't we start in on some questions while people give it some thought? One very good question that came up recently was, what guidance does the OHA have for judges doing judging during COVID? Next slide, please. Our answer. As a judge, you must always feel personally comfortable when you take on any judging assignment, be it COVID or not COVID. The key during COVID is to check with the health unit for the location of the show. Not necessarily your health unit, but the health unit that covers the area where the show is actually taking place. And you have to ensure that you're in compliance with whatever requirements are going to be or are in place on the day of the show. Now, keep in mind, these requirements are changing daily. I know Ontario in the last few days has opened up a lot more activities, which is going to, of course, affect our ability to have in-person shows. But do make sure that you call on the health unit. Don't depend on whoever in your society is running the show to know what the specifics are of the health unit. Local news reports, although they're good, they give you a clue, they aren't the official set of requirements. So we're just suggesting that you make sure that you are in compliance and that you take all the precautions that have been set up by the health unit and any additional precautions that perhaps the individual society or the venue sets up. As we move forward with the reopening of Ontario, there's going to be some lag time in terms of what people's comfort levels are going to be in terms of being indoors and in close proximity. As we all know, when you're setting up a flower show, there's a lot of people hustling around, so we have to be aware of that. Normally during judging, of course, we have the judge and we have two clerks So it would be very easy to socially distance during the actual judging, but we just have to make sure that we're always in compliance with the local health unit. Next question. Can I use oiled leaves in a floral design? Good question. Can you? Next slide, please. The answer is yes, you can, unless the show prohibits it. Always remember that the show schedule is the law. So the show schedule can set up very specific requirements that are not necessarily the ones in OGIS, which we use as guidance. But if you do look in OGIS 2019, the newest version, please make sure you're always using the new version of OGIS. You can retire the old version. Tips in preparing of entries clearly states that wiring, oiling, spraying with leaf shine, and artificial coloring is prohibited in the horticultural division. You'll have to note here that nothing is said about in the design division. So therefore, unless the schedule prohibits it, you can use oiled leaves in a floral design to give you a nice effect. An oiled leaf would give you a very different appearance of a leaf, change the texture of a leaf. So yes, it is permitted unless prohibited. Next slide, please. This is a horticultural question. And then we'll get back to, we've got a couple questions popping up in the chat, but we'll finish this one. In the horticultural division, can faded petals be removed from the back of a dahlia when showing it? So you go out and get your dahlia, you're all ready to go to the show, but there's a few faded petals. What can we do? Next slide, please. Answer, page 63 of OGIS, states that the removal of faded petals from the back of a dahlia is permitted, but it mustn't spoil the form. So please make sure if you're just taking a few faded petals off, that when you look at your dahlia, you haven't changed the overall form of it. Because if you've taken too many petals off and you spoil the shape and the form, you're going to be penalized. In the design division, you are always allowed to manipulate flowers' form and flowers' structure. So in design, we wouldn't worry. You can do whatever you want to a bloom. It's just got to be appealing to the judge. Can we now go to the chat and see what questions have popped up there? Interpretation. Okay, this is a photo question, Jim, for you. Regarding interpretation, any shows I've seen state photos must have horticultural elements. Additionally, if a class title asks for red tomatoes and there are no tomatoes, red or otherwise, in a photo, would that photo be disqualified?
Let me go back to the first part of the question. Can you repeat that, please, Penny? The first part?
In any shows I've seen, it states photos must have horticultural elements.
Yes, that's true, unless the schedule calls for something different. Again, the schedule is the law of the show, and they can ask for whatever they want. In general, unless they specifically say you can't, in a horticultural show, we would expect it to have some horticultural material in it. Is that, hopefully that answers your question.
Okay, and the second half was if it asks for red tomatoes and there are no tomatoes, red or otherwise, would the photo be disqualified?
Again, that would come down to non-compliance, and you would take off all the points for non-compliance, and the photo wouldn't win. I mean, it could if it was the only one there, I guess, but it comes down to, you can only tick off the amount of points that are allowed for that section of the non-compliance. So non-compliance would be in ours 15 points. So you take off the whole 15 points in non-compliance, and the photo shouldn't win. Does that make sense? You can't take off more than 15 points. That's all it's worth. Okay.
So I'd just like to go back to the very first question.
Okay.
So this was interpretation of the topic title used to be part of the consideration. Does that fit into the new scale? And if so, where? And this was, she was asking about photography, I believe.
Yes, again, that would be under compliance. That would be worth the 15 points. Under presentation, the compliance part, does it comply with what the schedule asks for?
Okay.
Does that make sense to everybody? If not, let me know.
So the next one, for the virtual shows, we dropped the photography class because we thought it would be too hard to judge a photo of a framed photo. How are people still including this class having photos submitted? Also, Guelph Hort had Penny as the judge of our first virtual show, and she provided so many helpful points that helped to make it successful.
Yeah. Okay. A photo of a framed photo. Actually, I'm not sure why you would ask for that in a show schedule. But if it was there, the judge would have to judge it. Does that make? I'm not sure I understood what the question was.
I think the answer here is that the photos now in the photo competition or photo class are being submitted digitally.
So they put a comment. They put a comment in that says the photo class specifies that the photo must be framed.
And that would make sense in an in-person show. Now that we've gone virtually, the schedule needs to be revised to essentially provide guidance on how a digital copy of the photo is to be submitted for judging or to the show. And there are some in the guidelines, particularly including, well, there are specifications about, particularly in the virtual show guidelines, about how large a file needs to be in order to have the resolution for good judging.
But along with that, if
megabytes or larger.
If the schedule writer made an error and asked for a digitally taken photo that was in a frame, you would have to do it. It's whatever's in the schedule.
Thank you. We have another question. Are cut vegetables or fruit allowed in designs?
The answer actually comes out to be yes, if they are sealed. You can't put them in if they are going to start running or smell or decay. But if they are sealed properly, they are allowed. And I did have someone ask me that just the other day. How could you seal them? And the answer I came up with was hairspray would seal it. And the garden club's one lady gave me the tip that nail polish would seal a piece of fruit. I'm sure there are other ways, but that's the two I've come up with so far.
We currently at this time do not have any more questions in chat. Amy, are there any from Feedloop side?
Nope, I don't see any at this time.
Okay, thank you.
Maybe what I can go over a bit, and it's actually something our group has been talking about, and we do realize that there could be the odd error in OJS 219. And yes, we picked some out. We think they're very minor, but if you see something, please send it in to the committee. They'll look at it, and if it's warranted, they'll rectify it someplace. We are thinking about putting it online, any changes that we thought should be made.
Great. And I might just make a reference to the current slide here, where there are many other things to look at on the shows tab, including now our new quarterly newsletter, Showtime. Of course, the OHA judges list is there. The Q&As will be there available to refer to. There are forms and applications. There's also a judges learning library that is developing. And Jim is the judging school updates coordinator, and the information on that is also on the shows tab.
Thanks, Kathy. We do have one more question. A couple. Are photos that are called for at an in-person show supposed to be mounted or matted? And we lost Jim.
I guess I could take.
Sorry, I lost. I was cut out, and then when I came back in, I forgot to turn on my mic. It all depends on what the schedule calls for. Schedule can call for mounted, or they might call for matted. If you put them in the wrong way, the judge is probably going to take off all the points for compliance. So it's up to the exhibitor to make sure you understand your schedule.
Okay, I have another question here. I don't know that you guys can answer it, but maybe other societies that are on here can later on. It says, did any other societies try a virtual flower show this spring? And if so, how did you manage it? Penny, your society did one, did they not?
Yes, Gananoque did their April show virtually and judged it. And our June show we did virtually, but we didn't judge it. And the reason behind that was it is a lot of extra work for whoever's running the flower show to format all the photos so they're non-identifiable, send them to the judge, get them back, and then have to revise the identification on the photos to show who they belong to. Did it work? Yes, people had no problem following the schedule. We kept the schedule very simple and short, and people sent it in, and we had basically the same number of people compete virtually as we had competing in our normal in-person shows, but we just had a reduced schedule. So it is manageable. You need someone who has really good computer skills. If you're going to have it judged, if you do it unjudged, which we did in June, we posted the photos directly to Facebook, which was a lot easier because we have two people who can manage Facebook, and we just posted them as they came in. So yes, it's workable. Read the guidelines that are on the website, and I think you'll find there's lots of information there to make it easier.
Thank you. We had another one. I noticed in the OHA competition that some photos had been misplaced. Can the committee change them virtually, or would it be disqualified?
Well, this year it was a showcase. It wasn't an actual competition. So there's no disqualification per se, since it's just a showcase. You would have to check with, I believe, Vicky Colbert, to see if they could be put into the right categories, see if that can be done at this point. Check with Vicky.
Thanks.
And I think generally the answer there, certainly a traditional flower show face-to-face, the show committee would usually consult with the exhibitor if it's in the wrong class and would work with them to put it into the right class. And I know, Penny, in your show, virtual shows, particularly the judge one, that you in fact did have a
Yes.
back and forth with
Yeah.
exhibitors to deal with those issues. Now, is it appropriate to just unilaterally, as a show committee or a show chair, to move an entry into the appropriate class without consulting with the exhibitor? I don't know. It would certainly be, it would be nice for them, but I don't know whether it would be appropriate to do that.
And so there's another question here. How many classes did you have in Hort and or design? There's one society that had put an answer in saying Brooklyn did 3 design classes and 3 photography classes in the spring. We were pleased with the response and are now doing a summer and fall program too. No Hort classes though. And how many did you have, Penny, in yours?
I believe in our Hort class, we had about 15 Hort, and we had 5 designs.
Thanks.
And can I add to that, Penny? That's an interesting point, because as OHA certified judges, to recertify, we need to enter shows, preferably at least 2 shows, preferably different shows, and preferably in Hort and design. But the shows it currently specifies are to be written as standard. And what I'm seeing in a lot of the virtual show schedules, they are not being written to standard.
Yeah.
There's either no Hort division, because standard means it has to have at least a design division and a Hort division, and there are to be 5 classes in each. And I'm noticing that a lot of the schedules, because there are a number of societies here in District 2 that are doing virtual shows, they are not writing them as standard shows. So it's going to be an interesting conversation, I think, for the OHA judging committee, and in conjunction with the judges registrar, Sharon Nevins, on how we deal with that, how we may want to adapt to that. And the other thing is that, like the showcase here in the competition, the convention, it's also not being judged.
Yeah. And there's another comment from somebody else that says, in April, we had 3 Hort and 2 design, and in May, we had 4 Hort and 2 design. And again, not standard shows, so.
Yes, and if you look at the recertification form, because we did have a conversation about this as a committee, in recognition of COVID, I think the current guideline, and correct me if I'm wrong here, is that one of the entries that on one of the shows that you enter can be virtual, but we are hoping that the other would be a standard, like a traditional show, face-to-face show. Again, that may need to be adapted depending on what happens going forward.
So another comment, our group, the Brampton Hort, called it a monthly flower show challenge and had it in March, April, and May.
What we did in Gananoque was, rather than having, typically an in-person show, you have to have everything in the night before or by 6 p.m. in the evening. What we did to make it easier for people is we just extended the entry time, so that you had, I think we gave people a month to send all their photos in. That gave us time to organize them. And then when the time at the deadline, then we were able to send stuff off to the judge. So instead of having a 1-day show or a 2-day show, our April show was a 30-day show, and so was our June non-judged one. We spread it out over a month.
And I would say in looking at the various schedules, that's sort of an emerging pattern, that there is a time frame, could be 10 days, 2 weeks, in your case, a month, over which you it can take photographs of your entries and submit them. And that's an interesting development because it allows us to see a broader range of entries, particularly horticulture, but even in design, because you have different plant material growing over that period of time. The other thing, I mean, I've participated in a few now, and the other question I have is, do you have to cut the plant? Does it have to be a cut specimen?
Yes, it does. If it's in a specimen class, it must be cut. It is a specimen class. It's not a plant. Yeah.
Although
Specimen
some
cut.
schedules don't say specimen. They don't say cut specimen.
Unless the schedule wants to say you cannot, you don't have to. But in judging, yes, in a show, unless the schedule says otherwise, it needs to be cut material, cut plant material.
Because in one show that I was in recently, they wanted us a branch of a flowering shrub. And you could take it live on the plant.
If they told you you can, then
Yeah.
you can. If
Which
they
I thought-
don't say you can, you can't.
Which is very particular to virtual shows as a medium.
Yes.
Which is kind of nice when you have a small garden.
Yeah, and it's something that schedule writers might want to look at, putting that in their schedule.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So we
And
had,
I'd also like to encourage schedule writers to do their virtual shows as a standard show. I mean, if you put 3 classes in, you might as well put in 5. It's not a big jump more, so put them in it and make it a standard schedule.
so we did have another comment. I believe this is still from Brampton Hort. It said, we used the polling option and called it a viewer's choice. They were presented at the general meeting during those months, which I believe were March, April, and May. And our entries were to begin about a week ahead of time. Somebody else said, I see local societies having several flower shows judged by members. We judges need shows to judge, thus educating exhibitors. As an artist, the more professional the camera, the street photo. I'm not sure, there's nothing else, so I don't know.
Well, they do bring up a good point that participating in virtual shows with digital imagery is a lot about taking photographs of your plant material. And so in the virtual show guidelines, there's a very long section, comprehensive section, let me rephrase, about how to go about doing that, since we're not all photographers.
I also understand the point that she makes, if I understand it right, is they're having their flower shows judged just by members of the society and not by actual judges, qualified judges, which it makes it hard for judges to get their time in.
Well, as you know, Charlene, judging shows is actually not a part of recertifying because it's not up to us. I mean, we need to be invited, right?
Yeah.
So, but again, I'm having a bit of a detail blank here. For our entries, exhibiting entries, do they have to be in a show that's judged, not just standard, but also judged?
I believe so. I would have to go and check that, but I believe that is the whole point, is having them judged by a qualified judge. So
Yes.
that you're being judged by someone who knows the criteria, as opposed to what, polls and votes by members who don't necessarily know the criteria and may be making decisions based on their own, as we know, biases. So we do encourage the use of judges wherever possible, but also we have to accept the fact that under the COVID restrictions, virtual shows, there is that requirement to have a show committee that is very IT proficient, and that may or may not exist in some societies. So it may be just easier to have the members pick what they think is the nicest flower.
We have another comment from Elizabeth Schleicher. For their shows, she says, for our shows, I included a sample photo of what the committee was looking to see on the virtual show table. So people had something to look at and understand what they were looking for.
That's a good idea.
That's a very good point, Elizabeth, and that could be very easily included in a virtual schedule, is a list of tips on how to take good photos and a sample photo of what is a good photo. And with cameras today, I mean, everybody has a cell phone. My cell phone can take just as good a picture as my Nikon camera now. So a lot of people have access to a good camera.
So we have a couple of more comments in.
Sorry,
chat.
Charlene, just before we leave this comment,
Sure.
Elizabeth, it would be great if you would share that with us, that schedule, or so we can have a look at it and see about how to go about including that idea. I think it's a very good one as well. Sorry. Okay, Charlene.
Okay. So we have a message from Kathy Dyer. She says, I'm missing something since I came late and I'm rather slow. Was the OHA competition not judged?
That is correct. It was a showcase. It was not judged. There was no competition as we normally do it. It was unjudged and a showcase, and it was just an opportunity for everybody to show off what they had growing at the time in their gardens all across the entire province. So you'll notice if you go and look at it, there are no first, seconds, and thirds, and it was just to get people involved, to inspire people to get out in their gardens.
We have another comment from Lynn Milnick. I judged the D5 Spring Flower Show, and it specifically said that specimens could be shown in the garden, but a few specimens were cut, so judging was interesting.
Yes, that makes sense. As long as the schedule said they could be shown in the garden, yes, that's acceptable.
And Elizabeth said she will send that to you.
That's great. I presume too, Jim, it would be that it could be rather than had to be or must be. So cut was not precluded by that statement. That could be shown.
Yes, in what she read, it said could be, yes.
So in the Ottawa Horticultural Society, they ran a virtual show this summer. I guess it's called a summer show. And one of the criteria, even if you had it in your garden, was that it needed to be a single plant. So that made it interesting.
Yes.
On how you get a single plant in a garden.
Yeah.
So
They can make up the rules as they like.
Well, I made ground and I had to put it into the garden, like you make an enclosure.
Yeah.
It's sort of like in design with a niche, But now it's horticulture niche.
Yes.
We have 10 minutes remaining, so if anybody has any other questions, please type them in chat. So from Bev Silk, oh, just a second, we have a few now. The guidelines indicate 2 pictures are to be sent per exhibit, one overall and one close up. Should the overall include the vase?
Was this in design or Hort, or does it say, Charlene?
It does not say. Bev, were you looking Hort or design?
Sounds like Hort.
Yeah.
Yes, she said she typed in Hort, yes.
I'm going to say yes. It should include the container. Although we don't judge the container, there is some marks on presentation. And I think they need to see how it's presented. Yeah, that's what my answer would be on that.
I think
Kathy,
that's one place where the schedule should specify
Yeah, it probably should.
whether the vase is to be included or not. I'd say if it doesn't say so, then you don't have to.
Yeah.
So
Because we're not judging the vase, and with a photograph, you can't really judge the horticultural quality of the stem,
Yeah.
photographing it through water in a vase. So
My biggest thing for all the judges now is what Lil Hallworth is saying all the time. If OJS doesn't say you can't, you can. That is a great statement. And I really like that.
Okay.
That's
So
a
we
good
have-
statement.
we have another one asking, where are the virtual show guidelines?
They're on the website. They're under shows. What comes after that?
I'm not sure which virtual show guidelines they're asking about here. The ones that we put together, the OHA guidelines, they're under the shows tab under what is it? Guides to show organizers, judges, and
Yeah.
curators. If you scroll down the page, if they're referring to the show guidelines that are referenced in the document, we actually don't have those posted anywhere. And it's an interesting, if that's the gist of it, well, could be part of the question. I did wonder whether there was value in compiling a virtual show schedule library, sort of as a series of documents that you could go and look at yourself, rather than just looking up the summary that we did based on those guidelines.
So we have a couple of just comments before we wrap up. So Bev was saying that some of our exhibits, you could hardly see the specimen and a close-up wasn't included. It made it very hard to judge. Sharon Slack, thank you for the information. I'm sure many horticultural societies will try virtual shows for the fall. And Jean just said thank you. She was just wondering what was on the website with regards to the show information.
Well, we could certainly discuss as a committee if there's some value in compiling schedules.
So we have another question. How do we know we are getting credit for attending this session?
As with all updates, you as a judge are responsible for keeping track of when you attended, what you attended, and what the topic was, and you fill that in on your recertification form when you get the form. So just make a note somewhere that you attended this session today virtually, and that counts. And with all recertification, we depend on judges being honest with us and telling us what sessions they have attended. We don't check, we don't keep a record.
Thanks, Penny. Would any of you like to make final comments before I close the session?
I just want to thank everybody. I see we're up to 48 participants, which is excellent. I'm so glad everybody took the time to listen in, and I'm hoping that you'll pass the word on to anybody who was in another session to make sure that they do come back and check these. They'll be up for 6 months, and you can go back and relook at it in case you missed anything. So thank you, everybody, for coming today and sitting in on this session. We really do appreciate it. And do let us know if you have topics or questions that you would like to see covered by judges on judging. And we will include them in the next update, and we will include them in the newsletter. We now have a wonderful newsletter. So thank you very much.
So Penny,
From all of us.
a question I have. So if you couldn't attend this session today, and you go and look, but you are a registrant and you can go and look at it within the next 6 months, presumably that would be towards a credit for recertification.
Certainly, because it's all going to be recorded.
Yes.
Yeah.
And the last thing I might want to mention is that there is also a session tomorrow by Anne Clark Stewart on judging roses that will also count as a credit towards recertification, attendance at that session or reviewing of that session. I forget what time it's at though. Does anybody remember? I
don't have it handy.
Yeah.
Yes, I do.
I think it's 1:30. I think it's 1:30.
It is. Oh, it is from 3 to 4.
Okay,
Yeah.
3 to 4.
3 to 4 tomorrow.
Growing, exhibiting, and judging roses.
Yes. And it's very thorough.
Okay.
I'm sure. So I would like to thank Kathy, Penny, and Jim for such a wonderful presentation. I know I learned something, and I'm sure that I'll be going to check out the shows tab on the OHA website for more information for myself, and I encourage everybody else to do the same. So thank you very much.
Thanks for moderating, Charlene.
Thank you. Much appreciated.
Thanks to the convention organizers as well.
Yes, this has been wonderful.
Yeah. Thanks so much.
Okay.
Take care, everybody. Stay safe.
Bye-bye.
Thank you all. I'm going to end the meeting now. It was a pleasure.
There we go. I think that went very well.
Oh. Are we still with people, I think? I believe. I think so. I think people are still online. You can leave though. Yes. Thanks, Penny. Thanks, Jim.
Well, thanks to you two for putting the final touches on that slideshow, and that was a good Q&A. More questions than we usually get in person, but
Yeah,
maybe
interesting.
that's a plus of doing things virtually. There's always positives to this. It's we have to keep that in mind, that this is a good way to reach judges all across the province where travel is an issue, especially in the north. So hopefully as a committee, we will try and put together some more of this style of learning.
I agree. So we'll talk offline. Bye.
Offline. Good afternoon. Bye-bye.
Enjoy the West Coast.
I am. It's wonderful.
Bye.
Bye.